Probably everyone these days has already noticed or even felt how quickly social inequality has engulfed our world. Unfortunately, today there is a very small percentage of people who have average income, and the main niche is occupied either by very rich people or by those who are far below the poverty line. And I think it's no secret that even though the world is constantly developing and improving, there are still people who live on the street. And by the way, there are many of them, and not only in our country. And it so happened that while some of them chose this way of existence by themselves, others ended up on the street due to difficult life circumstances. That's why they have to sleep on benches and look for food right in garbage cans. Well, happiness for them is when they are not indifferent. A person just sometimes pays attention to them. And let's be real. Often the homeless are simply looked upon with contempt. But friends, as it were, there are people who want to help everyone. And it doesn't matter at all whether you're homeless or just poor. And to prove it, I will tell you a story that happened a few years ago that has already melted the hearts of millions of people around the world. It was an ordinary day. It was drizzling rain outside, and Casey Fisher walked into a fast food place and ordered a cup of coffee. The girl thoughtfully looked out the window and thought about something of her own. Suddenly her attention was attracted by a homeless man who was picking up the loose change on the ground. And that would have been all right. But soon this man, not too clean but in clothes, entered the very same cafe. Slowly he took a few steps into the establishment, then stood at the door and began to count the coins he had collected during the morning. Customers quickly turned their attention to the homeless man and began pointing at the unexpected guest. And of course, Casey was no exception. Only the girl looked at him without disdain. She just scrutinized his facial features. The man's eyes were full of sadness. At least, that's what it seemed to her. So Casey quickly realized that he probably didn't have enough money to buy food. So without thinking long, she called out to the man and called out to her. It's also worth saying that the girl always had a different perception of homeless people, and instead of disgusting them, she felt compassion for them and always threw them a few coins whenever possible. "Are you hungry? How are you feeling?" Casey asked the homeless man. The girl didn't just inquire about the man's affairs, but offered him a sandwich and coffee. The men tensed a little in surprise, pulling away from Casey. I bet he wasn't often talked to, but since he was so hungry, he took her up on her offer. After all, if it hadn't been for Casey, he probably would have left hungry. After the order was fulfilled and the man was brought his food, Casey spoke to him again. "Would you like to have a seat with me? I'm alone at this table anyway." Of course, the tramp was surprised by such an offer. After all, often everyone tries to avoid him. But here he was treated to food and even offered to sit together at the table. The man hesitated, but sat down at Casey's table after all. He was very shy. He didn't know what to expect next. But she told him everything was fine, and he had nothing to fear. She just wanted to buy him a drink and talk to him for a while. They struck up a conversation. Perhaps Casey was too intrusive in her inquiries, but the man didn't resist and told the girl practically everything about himself. It turned out that the homeless man's name was Chris, and he told the girl his story. Why did he have to live right on the street? "My family was never well off. My father drank and didn't pay much attention to me. He used to lay hands on my mother and me. I couldn't stand being in a house with a tyrant anymore, so I ran away." That is how the stranger began his story. The man told the girl that he could no longer stand the abuse and beatings of his father. But life on the street was no better. Other homeless people were not kind to him either. They took away his food and hurt him. Chris didn't want to stay homeless and wanted to change something in his life, to get out of the situation he was in. But everywhere else the doors were closed to him. I looked for work for a few years, but when everyone found out that I was homeless, they immediately turned me down. There was not a single person who was willing to help me, and I wouldn't refuse that help, that's for sure. Everyone shunned me and avoided me. Chris went on with his story. He talked about how he wished he had a job, but no one was willing to give him a chance. He was also unhappy that his faithful friend Joe had died a couple of days before. He was the one who had always supported Chris and kept him company on long, cold evenings outside. Throughout his life on the street, Chris hoped that one day he would return to a normal human life and become the kind of person his mother would be proud of. But, alas, that did not seem destined to happen. The homeless man said that shortly after he ran away from home, his mother died. And it was from that moment on that he realized that he definitely couldn't count no more. It's also worth saying that the crisis didn't look stupid, and reasoned like a well-mannered and mature person. The man was very sorry that his life had turned out this way, but at some point he simply made a decision to go with the flow. Casey listened to the story without interrupting. She was filled with emotion and had tears in her eyes. She was well aware of the need to be sympathetic to homeless man's story and not to offend him with her pity. Chris talked and talked. He must have changed his whole soul that day. The girl and the homeless man talked for about an hour. This conversation could have gone on much longer, but Casey had to run. I got up from the table and wanted to go. Chris asked me to wait for a while. He walked over to the bar and asked for a piece of paper and wrote something on it. After that, he came over to me and handed me a note, Casey Fisher recalled. After handing the girl the message, the man thanked her for the meal and apologized for taking so much time. That, as it would turn out later, was the end of their fateful meeting. After walking away from the cafe, the girl took out a note to read what was written in it. She leisurely unfolded the piece of paper. As she read the message, she couldn't believe what was there. "Thank you. I wanted to commit suicide today. But after our conversation with you, I completely changed my plans. Thank you. You are the most wonderful person." That's what the note from the homeless man said. Casey couldn't control her emotions, and tears streamed down her cheeks. What is the real price of a man's life? It's not just the price of sandwiches, coffee, and an hour of free. Casey managed to do so much more for this stranger's life in such a short time. It would seem that a frank conversation is a mere trifle. But without it, Chris probably wouldn't be alive anymore. A simple human interaction with a kind-hearted girl made him realize there were good people in the world, and it gave him strength and encouragement to fight life's circumstances. He might even be able to start a new life. After meeting the homeless man, Casey posted this touching story on social media, posting a post. She wished to encourage other people to do good deeds. She also added that she hasn't seen the homeless man since, and she really hopes that he has started a new life. Well, this seemingly simple story actually teaches a lot. There are many different people in the world. Some are rich, some are poor, and some live on the street in the park. But you should never judge a book by its cover. Absolutely every one of us has a unique story that has predetermined all of our lives. If for us going to work, spending our evenings on the couch in front of the TV, eating good food, it's commonplace, for someone else it's a dream come true. And as this story shows, even the smallest act of mercy can change not just a person's day, but their whole life. Friends, how would you act in the place of a girl? Be sure to write about it in the comments. Also, please subscribe to our channel, where every day there is a lot of interesting things. But that is all for today. Check out the video.